In the quiet town of Eldenwood, where life moved at a pace as slow and steady as the river that wound its way through the valley, an unassuming man named Elias lived in solitude. His days were simple. He tended to his modest garden, repaired broken clocks for neighbors who still believed in their ticking hands, and spent evenings gazing at the stars from the rickety wooden bench by his front door. The world beyond Eldenwood felt distant, almost mythical, like something whispered about but never truly seen. Yet, despite his contentment with his humble existence, there was an ache within Elias, a longing for meaning, for connection, for something greater than himself. On one particularly clear night, when the sky seemed alive with constellations brighter than ever before, Elias noticed something unusual. A streak of light tore across the heavens, leaving behind not just a fleeting trail but a sense of foreboding that made his chest tighten. He had always been drawn to the stars, finding comfort in their silent watchfulness. But tonight, they seemed restless, almost agitated, as though trying to warn him of something yet unseen. The next morning, while walking along the edge of the forest where the trees grew thick and wild, Elias stumbled upon an object unlike anything he'd encountered. It lay partially buried in the soft earth, gleaming faintly under the pale sunlight filtering through the canopy above. At first glance, it appeared to be no larger than a loaf of bread, smooth and metallic, its surface shifting subtly between shades of silver and gold. There were no seams or joints visible. It looked less like a crafted object and more like a living thing frozen mid-motion. As Elias knelt beside it, curiosity mingled with apprehension. The air around the artifact hummed faintly, a sound so low it vibrated in his bones rather than his ears. He hesitated, staring at the strange object, unsure whether touching it would awaken some unknown force. But the pull was irresistible. His fingers brushed against its cool surface, and immediately, warmth spread through his hand, followed by a sharp tingling sensation that traveled up his arm. For a moment, Elias thought he saw images flash before his eyes. Swirling galaxies, towering spires of crystal-like structures on alien worlds, and faces that weren't quite human but carried a haunting familiarity. Then, as quickly as it began, the vision faded, leaving only the weight of the object in his palm. Elias wrapped the artifact carefully in a piece of cloth torn from his shirt and carried it home, his mind racing with questions. What was it? Where did it come from? And why had it appeared here, in this small corner of the universe? Though fear lingered at the edges of his thoughts, another emotion pushed forward: awe. This wasn't just debris from the sky. It was a gift, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Little did Elias know, accepting this enigmatic offering would set into motion events far beyond his comprehension. When Elias reached his cottage, he placed the artifact gently on the table, its shimmering surface catching the dim light seeping through the curtains. He sat down, his heart pounding as if the mere act of holding the object had awakened something primal within him. The room seemed smaller now, suffocating even, as though the walls were closing in, not out of malice but out of anticipation, as if they too were aware of the gravity of what rested on the worn wood before him. His breaths came slower, deliberate, each one pulling him further into focus. He could feel the artifact's presence like a second heartbeat, subtle yet undeniable. As hours passed, Elias found himself unable to look away. The object radiated a quiet energy, drawing his gaze back whenever he tried to distract himself with mundane tasks. Books lay untouched, tools remained idle, and the stew he had started simmering on the stove boiled dry without notice. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but it felt trivial compared to the hunger growing inside him, a need to understand, to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden beneath the artifact's deceptively simple exterior. He ran his fingers over the cloth covering it again, feeling the faint vibrations beneath, the same tingling sensation creeping up his arm. It wasn't painful, nor was it entirely pleasant. It was foreign, otherworldly, and intoxicating all at once. By dusk, Elias realized he was no longer alone. The artifact pulsed faintly now, rhythmically, as though breathing. Shadows danced unnaturally along the walls, stretching and twisting in ways that defied logic. The air grew heavier, charged with static electricity that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Still, he didn't move, didn't speak. Instead, he leaned closer, his face inches from the object, peering into its depths as though searching for answers written in invisible ink. And then, without warning, the artifact shifted. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, forming intricate patterns that glowed faintly blue. Shapes emerged, Symbols that bore no resemblance to any language he knew, yet somehow felt achingly familiar, as though they belonged to a forgotten part of his soul. A low hum filled the room, resonating deep within his chest. It wasn't mechanical, nor musical. It was alive, layered with emotions he couldn't name. Longing, sadness, hope. Each note struck a chord within him, amplifying feelings he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge. Tears welled in his eyes, unbidden, as memories surfaced. Moments of loss, moments of joy, moments he thought he'd locked away forever. The artifact wasn't just communicating. It was connecting, weaving itself into the fabric of his being. He wanted to pull away, to shield himself from the raw vulnerability of it all, but he couldn't. Something held him fast, not physically but emotionally, as though rejecting the artifact would mean rejecting a part of himself. When the glow subsided and the symbols dissolved back into the artifact's metallic sheen, Elias slumped forward, exhausted. His body trembled, sweat dampening his brow, but his mind raced with clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The artifact wasn't merely an object, it was a key, a bridge between worlds, perhaps even dimensions. And though he didn't fully comprehend its purpose, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: accepting it had irrevocably changed him. The question lingering in the silence of his cottage wasn't whether he should keep it, it was whether he could survive what came next. Days turned into weeks, and Elias found himself increasingly consumed by the artifact's influence. Every interaction with it left him drained yet invigorated, as though he were unraveling threads of a cosmic tapestry woven long before humanity's existence. Sleep became elusive. When he finally succumbed, his dreams were vivid and surreal, filled with landscapes bathed in hues no earthly palette could replicate. Towering crystalline cities floated amidst oceans of stars, their surfaces refracting light into cascading rainbows. Beings of pure energy danced across these vistas, their forms fluid and ever-changing, communicating through bursts of color and sound that resonated in his very core. Days turned into weeks, and Elias found himself increasingly consumed by the artifact's influence. Every interaction with it left him drained yet invigorated, as though he were unraveling threads of a cosmic tapestry woven long before humanity's existence. Sleep became elusive. When he finally succumbed, his dreams were vivid and surreal, filled with landscapes bathed in hues no earthly palette could replicate. Towering crystalline cities floated amidst oceans of stars, their surfaces refracting light into cascading rainbows. Beings of pure energy danced across these vistas, their forms fluid and ever-changing, communicating through bursts of color and sound that resonated in his very core. During waking hours, the artifact continued to reveal glimpses of its mysteries. Once, while tracing its surface with trembling fingers, Elias saw flashes of what appeared to be memories. Not his own, but those of someone, or something else. He witnessed ceremonies conducted under twin suns, rituals involving intricate dances and chants that seemed to bend reality itself. In another vision, he stood atop a cliff overlooking a vast desert, where sandstorms painted ephemeral murals in the air, each swirl depicting stories of creation and destruction. These experiences left him disoriented, struggling to distinguish between the tangible world around him and the ethereal realms unfolding within his mind. The townsfolk of Eldenwood began to notice changes in Elias. His once warm demeanor had grown distant, his conversations laced with cryptic references to other places and greater truths. When asked directly about the source of his newfound preoccupation, he offered vague smiles and shrugged off their concerns, unwilling, or perhaps unable, to articulate the depth of his transformation. Some dismissed his behavior as eccentricity, others whispered of madness, but none dared approach him about the strange object they occasionally glimpsed wrapped in cloth, glowing faintly in the shadows of his cottage. Yet, despite the growing disconnect from those around him, Elias felt more connected than ever, to something vast and incomprehensible. The artifact had become both a tether and a gateway, grounding him in a reality few could fathom while simultaneously propelling him toward horizons beyond mortal reach. With each passing day, the line between dream and reality blurred further, until Elias wondered if the artifact had chosen him not merely as its guardian, but as its conduit, a vessel through which ancient wisdom might flow back into the universe. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across Elias's cluttered workshop, he decided to probe deeper into the artifact's origins. The previous visions had hinted at civilizations far advanced, yet shrouded in mystery. Determined to unlock more, Elias meticulously arranged various tools around the artifact: magnifying glasses, prisms, even an old radio tuner he hoped might resonate with the object's frequencies. As he adjusted the tuner, a sudden burst of static erupted, startling him. Amidst the noise, a melodic tone emerged, harmonizing with the ambient hum emanating from the artifact. This unexpected synchronization triggered a cascade of luminous symbols to spiral outward from the artifact, filling the room with an ethereal glow. Entranced, Elias watched as the symbols coalesced into a holographic figure, a being of exquisite grace, her form shimmering with an iridescent light that defied description. Her eyes, pools of deep violet, locked onto his with an intensity that rooted him to the spot. She spoke not with words, but through waves of emotion and imagery that flooded his consciousness, conveying messages of peace mixed with urgency. The figure, whom Elias instinctively recognized as an emissary from the realm glimpsed in his dreams, extended a delicate hand towards him. In that gesture, Elias perceived a dual invitation, an offer to join her in understanding the cosmos' deepest secrets, juxtaposed with a plea for assistance, hinting at looming perils threatening both their worlds. Overwhelmed by the implications, Elias felt a surge of conflicting emotions: awe at the opportunity to transcend his human limitations, and terror at the potential consequences of such involvement. As the holographic figure began to dissolve back into the artifact, leaving behind a lingering scent of ozone and starlight, Elias grappled with the enormity of what had transpired. The artifact was not merely a relic or a tool. It was a beacon, summoning him to a destiny intertwined with beings whose very existence challenged the boundaries of his understanding. The realization dawned slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking over a darkened world. He had been chosen, not randomly, but deliberately, by forces he was only beginning to comprehend. The encounter with the holographic emissary left Elias teetering on the brink of a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of his life, and perhaps the fate of countless others. The artifact, now pulsating with a gentle luminescence, seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, urging him towards a path fraught with unknown dangers and unparalleled revelations. Each throb echoed the emissary's silent plea, a call to action that resonated with a profound sense of duty he hadn't known he possessed. Elias's contemplation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Startled, he glanced towards the entrance, momentarily jarred from his reverie. No one visited him unexpectedly. The isolation he had cultivated over years served as both sanctuary and barrier. Reluctantly, he rose, his movements sluggish as though weighed down by the gravity of recent revelations. Opening the door revealed Mrs. Hargrove, the town's oldest resident, her face etched with lines of concern. "Elias," she began, her voice quivering slightly, "people are talking. They're worried about you." She paused, her gaze flickering past him into the dimly lit interior where the artifact's glow cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Is everything all right?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears. Elias forced a smile, the effort making his cheeks ache. "I'm fine, Mrs. Hargrove. Just exploring some new ideas," he replied, his tone light but lacking conviction. She nodded slowly, unconvinced but unwilling to press further. As she turned to leave, her parting words lingered like a shadow. "Be careful, Elias. Not all gifts are meant to be accepted." Closing the door, Elias leaned against it, the weight of her caution pressing against his resolve. The artifact pulsed softly, as if in response to his turmoil. He returned to his seat, the chair creaking beneath him, and stared at the object that had become both his obsession and his burden. The choice before him was stark: retreat into the safety of ignorance or step boldly into the unknown, embracing the role thrust upon him by entities beyond his comprehension. Each option bore its own risks and rewards. To ignore the artifact's call would mean returning to a life of quiet obscurity, free from the specter of cosmic entanglements. Yet, the thought of abandoning the emissary's plea, of turning his back on the potential to safeguard not just his world but others, filled him with a gnawing guilt. Conversely, accepting the mantle of responsibility promised enlightenment and power, albeit at the cost of personal peril and possible estrangement from everything he held dear. As night deepened, the artifact's glow intensified, bathing the room in a spectral light that danced across the walls. It was as if the object itself urged him towards a decision, its silent insistence a palpable force in the room. Elias sat enveloped in this luminous embrace, his mind a whirlpool of possibilities and fears. The emissary's image flickered briefly in his mind's eye, her violet gaze piercing through layers of doubt and hesitation. In that moment, amidst the interplay of light and shadow, hope and dread, Elias realized the true nature of his dilemma. It wasn't merely a choice between safety and adventure, it was a test of his character, a measure of his courage and compassion. The artifact, with all its enigmatic allure, represented a crossroads where the ordinary met the extraordinary, where the mundane collided with the divine. And Elias, standing at this juncture, understood that whichever path he chose, the journey ahead would demand every ounce of strength and wisdom he could muster. With a deep breath, he reached out to touch the artifact once more, his fingers brushing its cool surface. The connection surged anew, flooding his senses with visions and voices, each one a fragment of a grand narrative waiting to unfold. The final decision hovered just beyond reach, tantalizingly close yet maddeningly elusive. As dawn approached, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, Elias remained seated, the artifact glowing steadily in his grasp, a beacon of unresolved destiny. Just as Elias felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him, the artifact began to react in ways he hadn't anticipated. Its glow intensified until it was almost blinding, and the room seemed to warp around him, as though reality itself was bending under the strain of its energy. The air crackled with electricity, and a low hum filled the space, growing louder by the second. Suddenly, the symbols that had danced across its surface before erupted into motion again, but this time they weren't just patterns, they were words. Elias froze as the markings rearranged themselves into letters from languages he vaguely recognized: ancient Greek, hieroglyphics, even fragments of what looked like Norse runes. But these weren't static images anymore. They shifted and morphed rapidly, spelling out phrases in rapid succession. One phrase stood out among the chaos: "The bond is forged. You cannot unmake it." Before he could process the meaning, the artifact let out a pulse so strong that it knocked him backward, sending his chair toppling over. His vision blurred momentarily, but when it cleared, he noticed something strange. There was a faint shimmering line connecting his chest to the artifact, like an invisible thread glowing faintly blue. He reached out tentatively, trying to touch or sever it, but his hand passed through it harmlessly. It wasn't physical, it was something deeper, something tied to his very essence. Panic set in as Elias realized the implications. This wasn't just a tool or a relic anymore, it had bonded with him on a fundamental level, embedding itself into his being. He scrambled to his feet, pacing the room frantically. Was this what the emissary had warned him about? Had accepting the gift meant surrendering part of himself? As if responding to his distress, the artifact dimmed slightly, and another vision flooded his mind. This one was different. It wasn't peaceful or awe-inspiring like the previous ones. Instead, it was chaotic, filled with images of destruction. Planets crumbling into dust, civilizations burning, skies torn apart by storms of fire. And at the center of it all stood a figure cloaked in shadow, their form indistinct yet unmistakably malevolent. The figure raised a hand, and everything around them collapsed into darkness. Elias gasped, snapping back to reality. His heart raced as he stared at the artifact, now pulsing erratically. What had he seen? Was this a warning, or a premonition? The artifact seemed to be showing him not only possibilities but consequences. But whose consequences? His own, or those of others? His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door, a sound more urgent than Mrs. Hargrove's gentle rapping earlier. Startled, Elias glanced toward the entrance, unsure whether to answer. The knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Finally, unable to ignore it, he approached cautiously, his hand hovering near the artifact for some inexplicable sense of protection. When he opened the door, he found not a concerned neighbor, but a stranger. A man dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by shadows cast from the brim of his hat. "Elias," the man said, his voice low and gravelly, "you've been chosen." Elias stiffened. "Who are you?" he demanded, gripping the edge of the door tightly. The man didn't respond directly. Instead, he stepped forward slightly, revealing a small device in his gloved hand. It emitted a soft green light, which flickered erratically as it scanned the area around Elias. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," the man continued. "That thing, it's dangerous. You need to give it to me." Dangerous? Elias instinctively took a step back, his mind racing. How did this man know about the artifact? And why did he want it? Before Elias could formulate a response, the artifact reacted violently. Its glow flared brighter than ever, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. The man winced, covering his ears, but Elias felt no discomfort. The artifact was shielding him, or perhaps amplifying its defenses against the intruder. "You idiot!" the man shouted, backing away. "Do you have any idea what happens next? Do you think they'll just leave you alone after this?" "They," Elias echoed, his voice trembling. "Who are they?" But the man didn't answer. Instead, he turned abruptly and disappeared into the night, leaving Elias standing there, bewildered and shaken. As the adrenaline subsided, Elias closed the door and locked it, leaning heavily against the wood. His mind swirled with questions. Who was that man? What did he mean by they? And most importantly, why was everyone suddenly so interested in the artifact? Over the next few days, strange occurrences began to plague Elias. Lights would flicker unpredictably, appliances would malfunction, and once, while walking through town, he swore he saw someone watching him from the shadows. Each time he tried to dismiss it as paranoia, the artifact would pulse gently, as if confirming his suspicions. Something, or someone, was following him. One evening, as he sat poring over old books and documents in search of clues about the artifact, he stumbled upon a passage that sent chills down his spine. Hidden within the pages of an ancient text was a description of a similar object, a key, said to unlock bridges between worlds. According to legend, the key was sought after by both benevolent beings and malevolent forces, each vying for control over its power. Possessing it came with great responsibility and great danger. The passage ended ominously. Once claimed, the bearer becomes a target. Not all who seek the key do so with noble intent. Elias closed the book with trembling hands. The pieces were starting to come together, but instead of clarity, he felt only dread. If the artifact truly was a key, then its purpose went far beyond personal enlightenment. It was a tool of immense significance, capable of shaping destinies, not just his, but countless others. And yet, despite the mounting fear, a spark of defiance ignited within him. Whoever they were, the shadowy figures hinted at by the mysterious visitor, they wouldn't take the artifact without a fight. For better or worse, it had chosen him. And Elias realized that running away wouldn't solve anything. If he wanted answers, if he wanted to protect himself and those around him, he would have to face whatever came next head-on. Little did he know, the true test of his resolve was closer than he thought. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the artifact pulsed softly beside him. Then, without warning, it levitated off the table, spinning slowly in midair. A beam of light shot upward, piercing the roof and illuminating the sky above his cottage. From outside came the distant sound of engines roaring, followed by the unmistakable hum of machinery descending. Elias bolted upright, his heart pounding. Peering out the window, he saw shapes moving in the darkness, vehicles unlike anything he'd ever seen, sleek and angular, hovering silently above the ground. Figures emerged from them, clad in armor that glinted eerily in the moonlight. They moved with precision, surrounding his home. The artifact pulsed again, and this time Elias heard a voice, not in his mind, but audibly, resonating throughout the room. It spoke in a language he couldn't understand, yet somehow he grasped its meaning. Prepare yourself. The trial begins now. As footsteps approached his door, Elias clenched his fists, determination hardening his features. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. The artifact had changed him forever. Whether he survived the coming storm or perished beneath it, he would not go quietly into the night. The footsteps outside grew louder, accompanied by the metallic clink of armor and the faint hum of energy weapons being primed. Elias stood frozen for a moment, his gaze darting between the artifact hovering in the air and the door that now seemed impossibly fragile. The voice from the artifact echoed again, calm yet insistent, "You are not alone." Before he could process the meaning of those words, the door burst open with a deafening crash. Shards of wood sprayed across the room as armored figures stormed in, their movements synchronized and deliberate. Their faces were obscured behind sleek visors, but their intent was clear. They had come for the artifact. Elias instinctively stepped back, shielding the glowing object with his body. "Stay away!" he shouted, though his voice trembled with fear. He wasn't sure if they understood him or even cared. One of them raised a weapon, a sleek device emitting a pulsating blue light, and aimed it directly at him. But before the figure could fire, the artifact reacted violently. It unleashed a blinding flash of light, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the glare subsided, Elias saw that the intruders were no longer advancing. Instead, they hesitated, their heads tilted slightly as if listening to something only they could hear. Then, without warning, they turned and retreated, moving with the same precision with which they had entered. Elias stared after them, bewildered. What had just happened? Why had they left so suddenly? As the sound of their vehicles faded into the distance, the artifact gently floated back down to the table, its glow dimming to a soft, steady pulse. For a moment, there was silence, only the distant hoot of an owl breaking the stillness of the night. Then, the artifact spoke again, not in words, but through images and emotions flooding Elias's mind. He saw flashes of the emissary from before, her violet eyes filled with urgency. She pointed toward the horizon, where streaks of golden light pierced the darkness. A fleet of ships descended slowly, their designs elegant and otherworldly. These weren't the aggressors who had just fled, they were something else entirely. Elias stepped outside, the artifact cradled protectively in his arms. The ships landed silently in the field beyond his cottage, their surfaces shimmering like liquid metal. From the largest vessel emerged a group of beings unlike anything Elias had ever imagined. They were tall and luminous, their forms shifting subtly as though made of living starlight. At their center stood the emissary herself, her presence radiating both power and compassion. "Elias," she said, her voice resonating in his mind rather than his ears. "You have proven yourself worthy." "Worthy?" Elias stammered, clutching the artifact tighter. "I don't even know what I've done." "You resisted the temptation to abandon your duty," she replied. "Even when faced with fear and uncertainty, you chose to stand firm. That is why we entrusted you with this gift." "But why me?" Elias asked, his voice breaking. "Why pick someone like me, a nobody from a tiny town?" The emissary smiled, her expression almost maternal. "Because sometimes, greatness is found in those who least expect it. Your heart is pure, Elias. You see wonder where others see mundanity. And now, you carry within you the potential to bridge worlds, to bring hope to those who have none." As she spoke, the artifact pulsed warmly against his chest, filling him with a sense of purpose he had never known. But the weight of responsibility was undeniable. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now," the emissary said, extending a hand, "you join us. Together, we will face the challenges ahead, the forces that seek to misuse the artifact's power. But know this, you are not alone. We are with you, every step of the way." Elias hesitated, glancing back at his cottage. This place had been his sanctuary for so long, a refuge from the chaos of the wider world. Leaving it behind felt like losing a part of himself. Yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't stay, not anymore. The artifact had changed him, opened his eyes to truths far greater than he could have imagined. To turn away now would mean denying the very essence of who he had become. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped forward and placed his hand in the emissary's. Her touch was cool yet comforting, and as their connection solidified, he felt a surge of energy course through him. Images flooded his mind once more, planets teeming with life, civilizations on the brink of collapse, and others striving for peace. Each one carried a story, a plea for help, and a chance for redemption. Together, Elias and the emissary boarded the ship, followed by the luminous beings. As it ascended into the sky, Elias looked out the window at the shrinking silhouette of his home. Though sadness tugged at his heart, a newfound determination burned brighter. He didn't know what awaited him among the stars, but he was ready to face it. The artifact pulsed softly in his hands, its glow steady and reassuring. It was no longer just a mysterious object, it was a symbol of unity, a beacon of hope. And Elias, once an ordinary man from Eldenwood, was now its guardian, tasked with protecting not just one world, but countless others. As the ship disappeared into the vast expanse of space, the night sky above Eldenwood returned to its usual quiet serenity. The townsfolk would wake the next morning unaware of the extraordinary events that had unfolded. Life would go on as it always had, untouched by the cosmic drama that had briefly intersected with their humble existence. But somewhere out there, amidst the infinite possibilities of the universe, Elias embarked on a journey that would define not only his destiny but the fate of all who dared to dream of a better future.